Alex Olshansky, thanks so much for coming on to Talk Beliefs all the way from Texas, USA. You are a doctoral candidate in the College of Media and Communication at Texas Tech University, and your main interests center on the social impact of online conspiracy theories, especially on YouTube, and how beliefs in a flat earth and other conspiracies reward the mind of the believer while simultaneously spreading harmful misinformation. So how have you been doing, Alex? You certainly chose the right time to be delving into conspiracies. There seems to be a lot of that around at the moment.
There are a lot of conspiracies going around right now. So it is a good time to be doing what I'm doing. They do seem to be getting more dangerous, and there seems to be more and more people believing them and buying into them. And so I typically focus on science-based conspiracies. However, the QAnon conspiracy seems to be taking off. And so even over in your neck of the woods, across the pond, as they say, there seems to be a lot of here in QAnon.
Yeah, it seems to be growing, definitely.
Yeah, it's only tangentially science related, so it's mostly political oriented. So it's still very interesting that it's garnered so much attention.
Well, before we dive into this fascinating subject, let's just hear a little bit about your background. Alex, you worked quite a long time in the banking industry originally. So how did that morph into a life of science communication?
I grew up in a suburb of Dallas, in the northern parts of Dallas, called Plano. I'm the son of Russian immigrants who left the former Soviet Union and came to the United States, and so I'm the firstborn in my family to be born in the United States. So my undergrad degree is in finance, mostly because I didn't, like most young people, I didn't really know what I wanted to do when I was younger, and so finance seemed like a safe bet. And so I fell into banking early on, and I started out as a file clerk, putting away files. And I worked my way up through the years. I spent 14 years in banking, and so I worked my way up and eventually became vice president of operations for Bank in Dallas. I found myself bored with banking, mostly because it wasn't my passion. I was good at it, but it wasn't fulfilling. And so after I left school, after I left college, I became more interested in science and more passionate about science. And so around 2016 or so, my friend from high school and now colleague, Dr. Ashley Landrum, she was wrapping up her postdoc at University of Pennsylvania, and she was beginning to do more work in science communication. And she noticed that I was passionate about science and not necessarily happy where I was in banking. And so she said, hey, why don't you come to Texas Tech and get your PhD and do science communication with me? And so somehow she convinced me to take the leap and make that transition into academia at a ripe age of 34. and so here I am trying to wrap up my PhD and find gainful employment somewhere.
Okay, let's get into the world of conspiracies and the flat earth. Conspiracies seem to be all over social media these days, especially YouTube. It's certainly been a fascination of mine. But what first drew you, Alex, to the flat earth and flat earth YouTubers and the motivation behind these rather unconventional beliefs?
Around 2017 or so, there's a time I was starting grad school. I was looking for research topics, and I knew that I was interested in the conflict between science and religion. And I'm not entirely certain about how we first came across flat earth. Ashley has a different opinion than me. She says we came across it on Facebook. But either way, 2017 was the time when flat earth started making noises in the media. And more people started paying attention to it. And so I think we came across it either on Facebook, but I became interested in it because I didn't know why they believed the earth was flat. And so I did some digging, and I came across a document. I believe it was by Dr. Eugene Scott. Eugenie Scott, who I believe at the time was working for the National Center for Science Education. In it, they described flat earthers on a continuum of biblical literalism, even further along, put down the line than creationists. And so this just, it first blew my mind, because that's the first time I associated flat earth with any kind of religious belief.
Yeah.
And so that really intrigued me. And so I think we came across the fact that they were having their first flat earth conference that fall, in November of 2017. And so I said to Ashley, we should go talk to these people and see why they believe this stuff. And so we did. Another student and I attended the first Flat Earth International Conference in Raleigh, North Carolina. And so we interviewed 40 flat earthers there. And then I went back myself the second year to the subsequent conference in 2018 in Denver. And I interviewed 20 more people at that conference. And I think what the big takeaway from the first conference was that almost to a person, the flat earthers told us that they had first come across flat earth on YouTube via their recommendation feed. And so it appeared that YouTube's recommendation algorithm was introducing these ideas to so many people, because a lot of them described having already been watching other conspiracy videos on YouTube, like 9/11 videos, Sandy Hook truther videos, things like that. And so YouTube's recommendation algorithm would say, here's a flat earth video 3 hours long that you should check out. And so many of them described being initially skeptical of those videos. And some of them even clicked on them just in order to debunk them. But for one reason or the other, they took those ideas on board and went down the proverbial rabbit hole, so to speak.
And you said you did your master's thesis on this subject?
Yes. So I was interested in what was really driving beliefs in flat Earth. And so I was wondering to know if it was this sense of biblical literalism, or if it was a kind of motivated reasoning to reject science. But it was what we found out was mostly this conspiratorial thinking that was mostly associated with flat Earth, and not necessarily the biblical literalism. And that makes sense, because if you think about it, most biblical literalists are not even flat earthers. It's only a subset of even those people who believe that the earth is flat, and usually that's associated with this kind of conspiratorial mindset.
Because there are a couple of lines in the Bible about, the four corners of the earth and things like that, but not a hell of a lot.
Right. Yes, I read the Bible myself, and I don't remember it describing the earth as a flat plane. But they have plenty of arguments as to why it does.
1. The horizon always appears perfectly flat 360 degrees around the observer, regardless of altitude. All amateur balloon, rocket, plane, and drone footage show a completely flat horizon over 20 plus miles high. Only NASA and other government space agencies show curvature in their fake CGI photos and videos.
Well, you've written more than one paper on this subject, along with Ashley Landrum and Othello Richards. So let's get into the psychology of flat Earth and similar beliefs, why these believers believe the things they do. So how did you begin your research?
Yeah, so most of our research was built off those initial interviews. We found out about the YouTube factor just by asking flat earthers where they first heard about these ideas. And so we also asked, was there a certain video that was particularly influential to you? And a common video that was referenced was Eric Dubé's 200 proofs that the earth is not a spinning ball. And in it, and this is common with many flat earth videos, if you watch them, they present what they call proofs, are lines of evidence that they say that show that the earth is not curved. And so what they do in these videos is they present these arguments in such kind of rapid succession that you've already made it down like 10 arguments through before you've had a chance to think about whether the first one or two, were correct or not. And what they do is many of the arguments that they present are scientific sounding. And so it can seem convincing to some people if you're not entirely scientific literate, or it just, the way they present the arguments, they sound convincing to probably to a layman, and they present them in such rapid succession and very confidently with this kind of imagery in the background that is supposed to show and support what they're talking about. So the videos can seem compelling, and even people like grad students at Texas Tech who have reported watching those kind of videos, even grad students, seem compelled by them. If they're not necessarily believe that the Earth is flat, it starts to get them to question what they initially thought to be true.
Yeah, and I know Eugenie Scott, who you've mentioned, who I have interviewed more than once. She called it the Gish Gallop. I think she actually coined that, which is what creationists will use if they have a debate with an evolutionist, as they call them, and they'll just throw all this stuff at them, and they don't have their opponent doesn't have time to refute them all in the allotted time.
Yeah, we also found that the videos and the idea of flat Earth provided many flat earthers with this newfound sense of meaning and purpose in the universe through flat Earth. So the idea that the Earth was created for humans was placed at the center of the universe, that it's all for us, it's all about us.
So what's happening here today? Why are you here?
This matters to me. Flat Earth shows you that you are not a mistake, and you were created, and so you have meaning, and you matter to the world. We're not monkeys floating through space on a ball as an accident.
Many of them describe this providing a newfound sense of meaning, and so going to flat Earth was for many of them was a profound experience for them, and so it was almost like a spiritual awakening. And so there's that aspect to it. Some of them did say that they were atheists before flat Earth, and so it seems as though flat Earth at least converted some non-believers to a more stringent literal interpretation of the Bible.
Yeah, sometimes they will say that, though. I've noticed with like people in the street who are trying to evangelize, they'll say, "Oh, I was a drug addict. Oh, I was a thief. Yeah. Oh, I was this, and then I went to this conference," and it makes you wonder how much of a atheist or sinner they were.
Yeah, that was my thoughts exactly. I think they called themselves atheists, but they probably retain this kind of spirituality or this kind of questioning whether there was a higher power or not. And so I think that in combination with this kind of conspiratorial mindset led them down the flat Earth rabbit hole.
Alex, you said that at the conferences you spoke to a lot of flat earthers. So what was your experience doing that? What was your impression of these people as personalities?
Sure. So I will tell you that despite having some strange beliefs, those people were rather genuine and nice and warm and open and quite pleasant to be around. Even though there was, they have this strange beliefs and there's this kind of open anti-Semitism at these conferences, the people were genuinely friendly. The conferences seemed to be like a kind of spiritual gathering, and so the people there were just in very they were very excited and just happy to be there, and there was this kind of sense of community about them because flat Earth provided such profound meaning in many of their lives that you saw many people hugging and crying, and it was just it's the atmosphere was very pleasant and nice, and it seemed like there was a sense of community, and many of them were there to either get some more ideas about flat Earth, but it seemed like many of them were there to kind of meet and greet their favorite YouTube stars that they saw on YouTube with all these flat earthers who have their YouTube channels. And so
I get the impression it could have been a hollow Earth convention, and you would have seen the same sort of thing.
Yep.
Interesting. So it's about community.
It seems that way, although I will preface that with many of them described, it's not the fact that they were lacking community before they came to flat Earth, and flat Earth provided this sense of community. Many of them had their communities prior to coming to flat Earth, but by espousing these new ideas about flat Earth, they kind of ostracized themselves from their original communities, and so they were kind of shunned by many of their family and friends and colleagues and things like that. And so I think coming to flat Earth, and particularly the conferences where they can all gather and meet each other and exchange ideas, that sense of that really provided a sense of community, and I think that's why they continue to keep going.
And it does remind me, Alex, of a lot of I interview a lot of people who have left religions, who have left cults, and they basically say, I was in this bubble and we all agreed with each other and nobody argued, and the outside world was, the evil, sin-filled world, and we felt safe together.
Yeah, there's definitely some of that, and I will say, as a researcher, they were very open and warm with me. You kind of would expect the opposite. They would think they'd be very skeptical of scientists coming in and probing them and asking questions, but they were very open and honest, and were very wanting to share their ideas and get their ideas out.
Alex, why do conspiracies like flat Earth come about in the first place?
Research on this topic suggests several possible reasons. Conspiracy beliefs have been associated with political extremism. So people on the political extremes will be more likely to believe conspiracy theories about the opposing party. There's a sense of science denial as well in conspiracy thinking. So the anti-vax, climate change, flat Earth, 5G, those kinds of things. Yeah. There's a sense of science denial with conspiracy thinking. Other research suggests that conspiracy thinking serves to reduce uncertainty during uncertain times, particularly after major world events like 9/11 or the COVID-19 pandemic. It also is associated with a sense of group belonging, particularly if a certain group feels threatened. People are more likely to believe conspiracies about the outside group. And so it has this sense of providing identity preserving or group preserving explanations when mainstream explanations are deemed insufficient or unsatisfying or just inherently dishonest coming from mainstream sources. There's an association with populism with conspiracy beliefs, and so we've also seen this rise of populism across the globe, no pun intended. And so we've seen a rise of particularly right-wing populism, and so this populist political belief is kind of centered on this struggle between the people versus the establishment. And so there's this kind of sense of anti-elitism, anti-pluralism. There's this kind of deep, visceral distrust of mainstream scientific institutions, media institutions, political institutions. So there's this kind of distrust, and when you have this distrust, it's much easier to come up with conspiracy theories and to believe them.
Yeah, it does always seem to be centered on a rich person or a smart person or a talented person. Perhaps there's a bit of jealousy there, do you think, or is that a bit cruel?
There may be a sense of that. So there's populism in conspiracy thinking have been associated with socioeconomic status. And so if you are lower down the chain in socioeconomic status, you're more likely to believe conspiracy theories about people who are higher in the economic status. So people who consider themselves elites or the wealthy. It's much easier to believe those kinds of things when people seem much more distant from you.
Yeah, because a conspiracy is never centered on, like, the baker or the mail carrier down the street. It's always some shadowy figure who sometimes they don't even know who they are, if they exist at all.
Yes, because there's always this sense of power when it comes to conspiracies. It's either elites or people in power who either are conspiring to either acquire more power and more money and more wealth, and to in some cases it's to hide or destroy religion, which is a big theme in the flat Earth community. I think there's a sense of the other. There's always a sense of the other. It's not always people in power, but it in some senses it can be associated with just out groups who you feel threatened by. And so this is kind of goes back to, like, anti-Semitism is an example of a kind of scapegoat thinking, where you blame society's ills on a particular group, ethnicity, or of some sort.
Yeah, it does make me think of cults. It makes me think of, for instance, Jehovah's Witnesses. They apparently, from what I've been told by exjws, is they see the whole outside world as this evil entity controlled by Satan. And you can't trust a word they say.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
right.
It's in this flat Earth community and the conspiracy group. It's generally similar. They assume that most people are not woke to what they're the information that they have. Most people just go through their lives not caring about what the actual truth is, like the shape of the Earth, for example. They think that most people are just satisfied with the ball Earth theory, as they say, and don't really try very hard to uncover what the actual truth is. And so they think that most people are just sheep or shills. And so you're either trying to actively trying to suppress the conspiracy, or you're just sheep blindly going along in society, not caring about what the actual truth is.
Well, your research has shown that these YouTubers have definite emotional needs, and these conspiracies satisfy those needs. So talk a bit about that.
Some flat earthers did have this kind of emotional or spiritual need that was fulfilled through flat Earth. As I mentioned, they had this kind of they have found this new sense of purpose in the universe by believing that the universe was created for them. I think in general, in the conspiracy world, there's this kind of sense that there's this darker reality behind what we all perceive as reality, and that YouTube is an avenue for truth tellers, and so it provides a platform for people who are actually seeking the truth and wanting to tell the truth that was somewhat unobstructed by mainstream censors, right? Although that has changed recently because YouTube has attempted to start to crack down on some of this content, and we can talk about whether that's worked or not. But I think this has angered many of the conspiracy theorists that their content is being downregulated or censored. But I think they're undeterred. And so, as far as emotion, the YouTube videos themselves seem to elicit some sort of emotion. So when speaking to flat earthers, and this is kind of what's driving my current work, I'm interested in the role that emotion plays in the uptake of this kind of information, because when speaking to them, it appeared obvious that they went through some kind of emotional roller coasters after watching those videos. And so many of them described having this kind of profound sense of wonder, of like a whoa type of emotional feeling when watching these videos. And so that's kind of associated with like amazement, astonishment. You're discovering something that was hidden, or that you didn't know was true. And so there's an emotional kind of rush that comes with that as well, because many conspiracy theories are describing these kind of nefarious plots.
Yes.
And the same as like they're saying that you've been lied to for your whole life, and so that it can evoke this sense of anger in the viewer. And so I'm interested in what role those emotions are playing in the processing of conspiracy theories. How does it affect their continuation of watching the videos? Does it prevent them from counter arguing the information that's being presented? And so that's the kind of the work that I'm working on now.
And I guess a lot of it has to do with self-validation as well, because if you discover that you've been lied to, even if you didn't suspect that, but suddenly you believe that, you think, well, I've seen through it. They tried to pull the wool over my eyes, but I figured it out. That must a wonderful feeling of self-validation for these people.
Yeah. I think it makes them feel like they've discovered something that other people haven't. And I think having that kind of explanatory power makes them feel either more powerful, less powerless, I guess, and more just, it's a kind of epistemic satisfaction that they're finding what the actual truth is.
Yeah, especially if they're in perhaps a low point in their life, or they have a debilitating illness or something like that makes them feel powerless.
Yeah, or you're living in uncertain times when you don't know what the truth is, and like even the mainstream, scientific institutions don't really know what the truth is. Like the COVID-19 pandemic, there was a good period of time where information was coming in, and most of the professionals in academia and the medical industry were like, we don't really know what to do right now. And so when you have this kind of uncertainty around in society, and you've figured out with like very high certainty that the answer, it can provide this sense of upliftment, of epistemic satisfaction, I guess is the word I would use.
Yes, I think some people look to science and want, all the answers right away. And when they don't get that, they think, oh, why should I trust them? You've just let me down. But this person on YouTube is rattling this off, and he sounds like he knows what he's talking about.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
and YouTube is really good at that. So because more people have access to the kind of production skills and the software that make good videos, anyone can make a video that seems relatively professional, professionally produced, and can sound convincing in the video just by that. So there's some research that talks about the fact that conspiracy theories generally come in this kind of documentary style format. It can give it this kind of sense of credibility that it really shouldn't have, just by making it seem authentic, like a real documentary. Plandemic is a good example. I'm not sure if you've heard of it. It's one of the big conspiracy theories that was going out early in the COVID-19 pandemic. And it was this kind of documentary style film that because it has that kind of style, it lends some credibility to it. So some people might perceive it as more credible. It also had a doctor in it, right? And so it gives this kind of air of credibility.
Someone in a white coat, anyway. Yes,
yeah.
With the Inception music playing behind it, which makes it sound all very big and important.
Right. Yeah.
Alex, do you think that the conspiracy mindset has always been with us, with humanity?
Yes, I think as long as humans have been trading stories and they've been spreading rumors. I think conspiracies have been around just as long as humans have been doing that. There's this kind of sense of scapegoatism with conspiracies. So if something's wrong with even your tribe, right, you're likely to blame that on the other tribe. And so I think it goes back a long time. And I think the same with, blaming other outgroups, like other ethnicities. I think that's been around forever. Anti-Semitism is a great example of that. And I think as long as humans have this kind of imperfect reasoning abilities, I think conspiracy thinking and conspiracy theories will be with us as long as that's going to be the case. And I don't necessarily know that we want to see a disappearance of conspiracy thinking, because some conspiracies are actually real. And so if we get rid of conspiracy thinking, who's going to be the one uncovering those conspiracies? So, I don't know that we want to see a disappearance of that.
Yeah. And I think a lot of it is to do with wanting certain things to be true. Do you think so?
Yeah. So there's a sense of motivated reasoning with conspiracy thinking, in that a lot of times it's you're accepting the information that supports your end goal and ignoring the information that doesn't, or disconfirming evidence. A good example is right at the end of that documentary, Behind the Curve on Netflix. Yeah. There's flat earthers are doing experiments to try to show that the earth is curved, and the instrument that they have didn't exactly show that. And so instead of accepting the evidence for what it was, is just confirming evidence for their ideas, their motivated reasoning kicked in and said, there must be something wrong with the instrument, not necessarily our ideas. Wow. And so there's this kind of sense of motivated reasoning in conspiracy thinking that kind of drives them and continues to push them down that line.
I don't think it's so much they want the earth to be flat in the case of flat earthers. It's like, I want to be right about this conspiracy thing I've latched onto.
Yes, and that's a good point. I think what's important for people to understand about flat earthers is that most of them don't necessarily have a solid belief about the earth being a flat plane. They're more certain that it's not a sphere, that it's not a spinning ball, than they are certain about what the actual shape is. To many, they have differing theories about the shape of the earth. Some of them are, it's a flat plane that ends at the disk that surrounds the earth, which is the ice wall. Some of them believe that it continues on beyond that. And so I think that's called the infinite plane theory. Some of them, like you mentioned, the hollow earth was one of them. So I think there's a more sense of rejection of what the mainstream narrative is, that it's not a spinning globe. That's what they're more certain about than what the actual shape is. I think it's there. And what's interesting is that they're genuinely curious about the nature of reality. And so that they're actually going out and doing experiments. They don't reject science per se. They're using science, just not in the right way, right? They're trying to use science to prove their arguments, but it's the motivated reasoning that says that this, the instrument's messed up, not our reasoning.
I'm sure you've seen the one where they pour water over a basketball and say, "See, it's not sticking." It's the earth is not the size of a basketball.
Yeah.
So, yes, you're right, but no, you're not right at the same time.
Yeah, and they'll give you simple arguments like that, like water always seeks its level, but they'll also come at you with pretty, like, if you're not really knowledgeable about physics and aerodynamics and even lens photography, like they get into the deep science of lens curvature to try to show that it's the lens curvature that's making the curvature of the earth, and not just the actual earth. And then they'll talk about physics to where you start to question why you're not sure about what you can't answer that question. There's an answer to the question, but you don't know what it is. And so I think if you're not science literate, if you're not really well versed in science, these things can seem compelling. And so when people come at you with really strong, compelling arguments, scientific sounding particularly, and this is what we showed in our study, was that these science sounding arguments tended to persuade more people than either the kind of religious arguments that they give or the conspiracy arguments. And so when they use these kinds of scientific sounding jargon, it can sway some people. It can convince some people.
Well, these conspiracies aren't going to go away soon. Flat Earth, COVID denial, 5G towers, they'll hang around or be replaced by something else. So how do we tackle this problem? And how do we deal with, say, a friend or family member who has become overtly conspiratorial?
Sure. So I think there's two levels of going at it here. I think there's a macro level where, as a society, or even as like social media platforms, can do things to prevent this information from getting out, and they are doing some of that. I do give YouTube some credit. They have modified their algorithms such that the flat Earth is no longer recommended to people in their feeds. And as somebody who spends a lot of time searching for conspiracy theories on YouTube, I can assure you that my recommendation feed is not full of conspiracy content. And so they have done better at in some aspects. On the other hand, it seems like a kind of whack-a-mole thing. There's some evidence that shows that as soon as they clamp down on conspiracy content on YouTube, it transferred over to Reddit. And so it seems like an ongoing battle that we have to fight, both at the macro level and at the individual level. And so I think as individuals, we have a kind of responsibility to engage with people who have these kinds of thoughts, and do it in a way that's respectful and cordial and just kind of curious about their ideas. And so you want to find what they're saying interesting. So yeah, that's interesting. Why do you believe that? And where did you get that information? And why do you believe this source but not this source? And so some of these question tactics, and I think a Socratic method is one that's I've heard is useful, of just constant engagement, of a slow kind of, I call it a slow nudging people to the kind of to the right side. I use this analogy of if we found out that a meteor was about to hit the Earth, the scientific community would get together and they would send something up there. And what we know now through science is that what you don't want to do is blow the thing up, right? Because then it's just going to come down, raining down on the Earth, destroy everything. What you want to do instead is to gently nudge the thing over, and so it just misses the trajectory of the Earth. And so that's the kind of analogy that I use with people. You want to kind of be there all the time, not all the time, but have these kinds of conversations with people over time. And if you do this kind of slow nudging, right, I think that's one way that as we as individuals can somewhat convince people to change their views, at least, or at least begin to question why they believe that stuff in the first place.
I could easily talk to you all day about this subject, Alex. I feel that we really only just scratched the surface. It's such an important subject, and I want to thank you for all the work you and your colleagues have done on this and continue to do. I will leave links to your social media and research papers in the description below, and hopefully we can have you back on the show in the very near future.
Sure, great. Yeah, I appreciate you having me on, and I look forward to speaking to you again in the future.